Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our event. I'm going to introduce the guest speaker, who is Rachel Radomski. I hope I said it right. She's from the Bogarash and Associate law firm. She focuses on the civil litigation. Their staff concentrates on personal serious injuries, disability claims, medical malpractices, wrongful death, and product liability throughout Ontario. Their firm prides itself on enabling injured victims and their families to obtain access to the justice system. Rachel joined the Bogarash and Associate law firm in 2015. She attended the Western University, where she received her Bachelor of Arts degree in 2009 and her Juris Doctorate in 2012. Rachel was called to the Ontario Bar in 2013. She is currently a member of the Canadian Bar Association, the Advocate Society, the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association, and the Women's Law Association of Ontario. Her website is www.bogarash.com. Rachel, if you'd like to take over. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, everyone, for coming today. My understanding is that this is actually going to be put on YouTube, so just a quick little disclaimer out there, as us lawyers like to do, that none of this constitutes legal advice, and if you do need legal advice, I recommend that you speak to a lawyer. So this morning, I'll be talking about CPP disability benefits. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me at any point in time, and I'm happy to address the questions. So we have quite the hefty agenda for us today, but basically, to give you an overview, we're going to chat about what CPP disability benefits are, how you apply, what they look at after you've applied, what happens if you are both, if they're accepted or denied, and how to appeal them. Some further information about our firm. I'm very excited and pleased to report that our firm, just this week, we were listed as one of the top 10 personal injury firms throughout Canada again. This is an accolade that we received in 2017 and 2015 as well, so we're very excited about that. As was mentioned, we specialize in personal injury, slip and fall, motor vehicle accidents, medical malpractice, all types of litigation. So the first question that people typically have are, what are CPP disability benefits? So Canada Pension Plan provides disability benefits for people who have made enough contributions to CPP and who are disabled and cannot work at any job on a regular basis. There's 3 different types of CPP disability benefits. The first is the typical CPP disability pension, so for people who have contributed enough and who are not able to work. There's a new available benefit for people who are over 65 and who cannot work, and also a children's benefit for an individual who has dependent children. What does disability mean? So there are many different types of disability benefits that I'm sure you've heard about, for example, on ODSP, income replacement benefits, lawsuits, but CPP disability benefits is a separate item in and of itself. And if you qualify for a different type of disability benefit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you meet the test for CPP disability benefits. In order to meet this test, you need to have a severe and prolonged disability. So prolonged means that it's not an acute illness that's going to get better shortly, but prolonged means that it's long-term and of indefinite duration. Severe means that it is a mental or physical disability that regularly stops you from doing any type of substantially gainful work, and we'll go and delve a bit deeper into that. Both the severe and prolonged criteria must be met at the same time. So you can't only have a severe disability that's acute or a prolonged disability that's not severe. What happens once you send in an application? It takes about 4 months for a decision to be made. As CPP is processing your application, they may give you a call to ask you some questions just to figure out some further information that they may need after reviewing your application. If you have a terminal illness, your application may receive priority handling, according to the CPP website. So when they review an application, the first thing they look at is to see if you've had sufficient contributions over your working life, and we'll go a bit into what that means shortly. The second thing they look at is whether or not you meet that severe and prolonged test. So they don't just look at what the disability is and check off a box. So for example, they don't just say, do you have chronic pain or fibromyalgia? That's sufficient. But they look to see how it affects you as an individual and how it affects you and your ability to work. These are some of the different factors that they'll be considering when they go through your application. So as I indicated, the nature and severity of your medical condition, how this and your treatment affect your ability to work, as well as what does your treatment include thus far. Have you tried taking different prescriptions? Have you tried going for therapy? Have you followed your doctor's recommendations? Does your doctor expect you to get better? What's your prognosis for the future? They also look at your different personal characteristics, and this is something that I think a lot of people don't really realize or don't think about when they're sending in their applications. But what does your work history include? If you're someone who's always worked in construction and you have something where you're not able to walk for prolonged periods of time or move your upper body limbs or lower body limbs, or you have those impairments, then that may affect your ability to work different from someone who has a more sedentary position. They also look to see your past work performance. Do you have an impressive work history? Have you consistently worked throughout the years, and such that they would assume if you could be working, you would be working? One thing that they do not consider is availability of work. So if you do have an impairment and you're not able to find a job that would accommodate you, but you could work in an accommodated position, then it's unlikely that CPP would approve you. If you turn to the booklet that we gave you, at tab 4, we have various case studies, and these are all case studies for individuals who our firm has actually represented, and cases that have gone to different CPP disability benefit hearings. And these case studies are quite informative and a good guide to keep in mind when you're sending in your application, working on an appeal, or considering if you would succeed in a CPP disability application. So the first case study that we see in that booklet at tab 4 was a June 2nd, 2015 hearing. This was a 58-year-old man who had immigrated in his teen years. His employment consisted of physical work only, so being a bricklayer, machine operator, construction, carpentry, things of that nature. In 2007, he had an unfortunate motorcycle collision that ultimately resulted in chronic pain in his back, radiating down to his leg, severe anxiety, headaches, and depression. So his CPP disability benefit application that he had sent in initially was denied. And after that point, our firm got involved, and we had a hearing for him. And these are the different factors that were assessed and considered. So they looked to see his objective medical treatment, as well as the actual objective medical evidence. So they looked to see, was anything broken? And the answer was no. Was he following his doctor's recommendations, which he was? And what was his actual injury? And there was a question as to whether or not chronic pain, which doesn't have objective evidence, could be considered a severe disability for the purpose of CPP. So what's actually decided in the decision is chronic pain is a compensable disability. There's no doubt that chronic pain patients are suffering and in distress, and that the disability they experience is real. Some further considerations were chronic pain on his capacity to work, and the adjudicator had written in their decision, it's not enough to simply demonstrate that chronic pain exists and to have the doctors diagnose it, but the appellant must show that his pain prevented him from regularly pursuing any gainful occupation. And on top of that, it was clear that he couldn't do any physical work, which is where his experience was, but the question was, could he do sedentary work? Could he retrain for a different occupation? And if there's evidence of work capacity, so the ability to do that sedentary work or retrain, the individual still has to show that they're not able to do that. It's not, can you do the jobs you were doing before, but can you do any appropriate work? And they found that he had been unsuccessful at trying to retrain and find alternate employment, so his CPP disability benefits were approved at the hearing. So what does any job mean? It's kind of a broad term. It means a job based on your level of education, your language skills, past work and life experience, and marketable skills. And you have to look at it as they recognize from a real world perspective. What can this person realistically do? The next case, just behind the blue paper, is a second case study. This was a hearing that happened on December 7th, 2017. This was a young individual who was only 45 years of age, who had completed a PSW diploma in 2005, and her experience had been predominantly in working as a PSW worker, and prior to that, she had been a factory laborer. She had taken the time prior to 2006 to actually retrain and get her certificates so she could become a PSW. And the CPP Disability Tribunal had found that this meant that it showed she had a good work ethic, that she was someone who wanted to and was willing to generally work hard, and she had shown this over the past over 10 years. And they found that although she was relatively young, the combination of her limited transferable skills and her limited education, as well as her functional limitations, preclude her from being able to successfully retrain or from accommodated work within her limitations. And interestingly, they also said that the measure of whether the disability is severe is not if it's a severe disability, but whether this disability prevents them from earning a living. So you can see the common theme running through these decisions. This was an interesting case because she actually didn't try to find any alternate employment, as we saw in the last case. She didn't try to find any sedentary work or try to retrain, but they found that because of her past work history, if she was able to work in any capacity, she would be doing so. And based on that, they drew the conclusion that she met the test for severe prolonged disability that affects her ability to work. How did they determine that? Well, they looked at her past work history, but they also looked at evidence from the applicant herself as well as witnesses. This witness information is crucial to show who a person is, whether or not their evidence is believable and trustworthy and credible. They also looked at the treating doctor's records, and when they see that the treating doctors have shown ongoing notes talking about the impairment, inability to work, and limitations, not just in a work environment, but in every aspect of an individual's life, they're able to then draw conclusions about how this would affect their ability to work. So for example, if a person's off work and even just doing an hour of housekeeping causes them extreme fatigue and pain, then there's little to no way that that person would be able to hold a full-time or even part-time job. So those factors are important. If there are expert reports, so if you've had a different legal action where experts have opined on your ability to work or your disability, those are also very helpful. So if you're sending in your CPP disability application, what are some things that you want to highlight? Age is definitely one of them. Typically, the older you are, the easier it is to get approved for CPP disability benefits, and realistically, the younger you are, the more difficult it is. I think there was actually just a study in the newspaper not too long ago that said if you're in your 50s and you try to find another job, good luck to you, pretty much. But if you're in your 20s or your 30s, they think that you're more able to retrain, you're more up to date on technology, and you could do more sedentary work. They look to see what your highest level of education is. We have a lot of clients who may have immigrated here from other countries who may not have even obtained a high school education, let alone college or any training certificates. And for these individuals to then go back to school when they're already suffering from these disabilities that impair their concentration is very challenging. Medication use is important to show that you're following what your doctors are telling you, as well as we've been discussing, how your specific injuries affect your ability to work in any job, as well as how it affects the rest of your life. If you've tried to retrain or work, you also want to include that because that shows that you've made efforts to mitigate and you've been unsuccessful. When you're applying, you have to apply in writing. Even though you obtain the form online, you have to print it out and actually send in a hard copy. There's two separate forms that form the application. One is your application form, and the second is a medical report that's completed by your doctor or a nurse. They recommend on the CPP website, do not wait for your doctor or nurse to complete their medical form before you send in the application form. Send in the application form as soon as you're able to. If you're unable to complete the application form for any reason, you're able to have a friend or family member help you do so. A common question I hear is the doctor is trying to charge me for completing the application form. They can invoice CPP up to or they can invoice whatever they want, but CPP will reimburse up to $85 for completing the report. Some people are already receiving disability income from another source, whether it be ODSP, Ontario Works, income replacement benefits, etc. You may still be eligible to receive CPP disability benefits, but there are certain offsets. So, for example, if you're receiving ODSP, I believe you get an offset in your ODSP. If you're receiving long-term disability benefits and you're approved for CPP, you'll then get an offset in your long-term disability benefits. And if your CPP arrears are paid, you actually may owe your long-term disability benefit provider money. So something that we commonly see is if someone is on long-term disability benefits, they may have an obligation pursuant to their policy to either apply for CPP disability benefits, and some policies even require that they do appeal their CPP disability benefits because their LTD insurer benefits from that. If you're not sure if there's any offsets or any requirement to apply, it's always good to contact either your insurance company or the social assistance company for details. I mentioned that there were two separate requirements at the beginning, both that you have a severe and prolonged disability as well as that you meet the contribution requirements. So the contribution requirements are 4 of the last 6 years or 3 of the last 6 years if you've contributed for at least 25 years. There are a lot of exceptions to the rule, thankfully. For example, people who may have had children, people who may be applying late. Most people that I speak to don't even know that this benefit exists or that they can apply to it or that there's a timeline. So the late applicant provision is actually quite helpful. If you're separated or divorced, if you've been physically or mentally unable to apply, or if you've lived and worked in another country, those may be other situations in which the contribution requirements may be different. If you're approved, they will start the 4th month after the month you're determined to be disabled. So it doesn't necessarily mean the month that they approve you. The date that you're determined to be disabled is likely going to be a date before that. And you may receive up to a maximum of 12 months of retroactive payments from the date your application was received. The quantum of benefits varies based on your contributions. In 2018, the average monthly CPP disability benefit was about $970, $971.23, and the maximum amount is $1,335.83. You get an amount, as I indicated, based on how much you've contributed to CPP. You also may be able to receive CPP disability benefits in a quantum for any dependent children that you have. If you are approved for CPP disability benefits, you are able to volunteer, which is great, without having any effect on your CPP disability benefits. And you can go back to school as well as take a retraining program. So it doesn't mean that you're relegated to being at home. You can also earn a certain amount. So we have a lot of clients who do have CPP disability benefits and they're approved. And then 5-10 years later, they decide they want to try to work, and they're able to do this without fear that the CPP disability benefits are going to stop and without the pressure of not having any income or having to find a job. So it really takes that weight off your shoulders. There is the possibility that once you're approved that your case is reassessed from time to time. I'm not able to tell you how often this happens as those statistics aren't quite published on the CPP Disability website, but just be aware that that is a possibility. Because they are able to reassess them, they're not necessarily permanent, but the intention is for them to be paid as long as your disability stops you from working at any job. If you're no longer disabled, technically you're not supposed to receive the disability benefits anymore. If you turn 65, then it will turn into the CPP retirement pension, or if you pass away, of course, they're no longer payable. An interesting fact, which I believe also helps people and kind of takes some weight off your shoulders, is if you do go back to work full-time, once you've already been approved for CPP disability benefits, you've decided to give it a go, you're really happy, but then after a couple of months, a couple of weeks, a couple of years, your disability returns, you don't have to go through the entire process again. They have a different process where you can apply to have your benefits automatically restarted if your disability returns, and which I think is extremely helpful. So a lot of CPP disability benefits, unfortunately, are denied, and the first step to appeal that is to make a request for reconsideration. And this must be done within 90 days of receiving the written decision on your application. So this is typically at the point where our firm becomes involved, or you may want to seek some legal advice. Our firm does not send in initial CPP applications, but we assist with either reconsiderations or appeals. So the letter of reconsideration includes why they made or why the decision was wrong. So you need to complete the request for reconsideration, and you want to include, of course, your personal information and a detailed explanation for why you think that the decision should be reconsidered. So this is really your chance to advocate and to go through those other factors that we indicated and that I highlighted. So how old you are, what your education, training, and experience is, not only what your disability is, but how your disability affects you in every single area of your life. If you have any new information that's come about since sending in your initial application, so for example, you may have tried to take a course, to volunteer, you may have a new diagnosis, include that on your application as well. It can take several months for a reconsideration decision to come in, depending on the case. And they may, again, after they receive the request for reconsideration, give you a call and ask you some further questions. If your reconsideration request is denied, the road's not done, there's another option for you. You have the ability to file a notice of appeal, which can lead to various things. First, it can lead to the decision being reversed and your CPP disability benefits being approved. Or it can lead to a hearing. It can lead to an in-person hearing or a hearing over the phone. The notice of appeal can only be sent in once you receive that reconsideration decision, and you must send in your notice of appeal within 90 days of the reconsideration decision. And here is where you want to include why the reconsideration decision was wrong. Some people sometimes say, well, I'm sending in the same information over and over again. And there may not be any new information to send in, but if CPP disability benefits are something that you believe you qualify for and you've been unsuccessful on your own, you may at this point want to hire a lawyer who can frame the issues a bit differently. For example, our firm, this is part of our wheelhouse. All we do is act on behalf of injured victims and have various types of insurance benefits approved for them. So we may be able to look at things in a different view or write it in a different way than you may have in the past. So that's everything about CPP disability benefits that I'm going to speak with you about today. Are there any questions? Sure.
I'm curious as to what the benefits are post-retirement.
So it switches to after retirement, it would switch to regular CPP benefits.
Oh. So what's ODSP?
ODSP is on.
Exactly what.
So ODSP is Ontario Disability Support Program, and that's a different type of disability program, and you're able to receive both at the same time. I'm not going to get into it here, but if you want, we can chat afterwards about it.
What happens if you became disabled before you were able to make enough contributions?
In that case, I would see if any of the exceptions apply to you. We can go back to the exceptions. You can try to apply for one of the exceptions that you weren't able to work for long enough before you suffered from the disability and see if they're willing to still pay you or approve you.
Is there a limit on the number of appealing of reconsideration?
So once the notice of appeal is filed and you have a hearing, I do believe if you're unsuccessful at the hearing, you can reapply for CPP disability benefits. But you just have to go through the process again.
You can do it unlimited times.
I don't know if it's unlimited, but I don't know if there's a cap on it. I do know you can reapply.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Okay, well, I'm going to be here for a while. I'm in a booth in the back room. If anyone has any questions for me, I'm happy to discuss. And I wish you all the best of luck.